Welcome to the Parallel World Library, where we explore strange and fascinating stories in other dimensions. Now, let's relax your body and take your mind to another world. Number 13 Mint Street by TunaV. Chapter 41. Another Artwork. 1. Sylvan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Then came a brief silence. Strangely, the other party didn't hang up, but continued speaking.
You're disturbing my artistic creation.
Hearing these words, Sylvan tried to memorize everything in his head, including the tone and inflection. Sylvan didn't think he had dialed the wrong number, nor did he think it was someone playing a prank, and he certainly wasn't naive enough to think the other party was really an artist. What kind of art could there be in a crematorium? Sometimes intuition is very important, as it can help you skip many small steps and go straight to the core of the matter. Although reason told him this was too strange and illogical, after a moment's silence, Sylvan used his right finger to pinch his throat and replied,
Then, do you need some valuable artistic advice?
The other party made a puzzled sound, seemingly not expecting the person on the other end to give such a response. Then he laughed. Sylvan heard the soft laughter through the phone. It was a masculine laugh, somewhat deep and sharp. Sylvan continued,
Or perhaps you don't really have any confidence in your artwork.
You're interesting. It's a pity. If you had called a little earlier, I would have been willing to listen to your opinion, but unfortunately, not this time.
Why?
When asking this question, Sylvan closed his eyes. It was a question that didn't need an answer. The other end provided an answer that matched Sylvan's thoughts.
Because this piece of my work is already complete. Only a few finishing touches remain. This troubles me somewhat. Can you understand this kind of trouble?
Sylvan replied,
When I was young and learning to paint, the teacher would point at an empty corner in my painting, saying it needed to be filled, even if what was added had nothing to do with my painting, just to fill the empty space. But time and again, this was always the most troublesome thing.
Yes, exactly this kind of trouble. This is exactly how I am now.
This is actually a sign of insufficient skill.
Sylvan continued.
That's why I couldn't become a painter when I grew up. Someone who can't even prepare a good composition before painting and ends up troubled about filling empty spaces. What kind of painter is that? How can that be called an artist? Where's the art in that?
After Sylvan said these words, the breathing on the other end immediately became rapid. Psychologists always know how to soothe others' emotions, avoiding triggering patients, and correspondingly, they are naturally skilled at identifying others' weaknesses.
You think you're an artist? No, actually you're not. You're just an arrogant fool. Please don't insult the word art.
The sound of teeth grinding came from the other end. Clearly, Sylvan's words had angered him. Sylvan held the receiver, feeling somewhat helpless because right now he had no way to do anything, not even call the police, because to call the police you'd have to hang up first. He also had no way to go down to the basement to find Aunt Mary or go upstairs to find grandfather because the phone cord wasn't that long. If he shouted for someone, it would surely transmit through the phone. The other end said,
I'm very disappointed in you. When we first spoke, I even thought you might be someone with aesthetic sensibilities like mine, sent by God. But unfortunately, you're not. Perhaps it's because you're too young. Your understanding of art is too superficial, because art doesn't discriminate by level.
Sylvan calmly replied,
But art does discriminate by skill.
Bang! The other end hung up with extreme force. Sylvan also put down the phone, frowning puzzledly.
How did he...
Sylvan released his right finger, his throat somewhat painful from pinching it for so long. He gently rubbed his neck while coughing a few times.
Cough, cough. Knew I was young?
The final words transformed from the previous hoarse, deep tone back to Sylvan's original voice. Knock, knock.
Come in.
The study door opened and Dis, sitting behind the desk, looked up at Sylvan standing at the door.
Grandfather.
What is it?
The crematorium. Something seems to have happened.
How do you know?
Because I just called there, and the person who answered the phone seems to be the killer, that perverted murderer from the Crown Dance Hall.
Grandfather put down his pen and asked,
Have you called the police?
Sylvan shook his head.
Call the police.
Grandfather suggested. Sylvan didn't want to call the police because the person on the other end had clearly stated his work was complete. That meant the victim was already dead. Call the police to collect a corpse? Sylvan felt it was meaningless unless the killer had broken his leg while leaving the crime scene and was lying there until the police car arrived.
Are you worried this is a prank?
Grandfather asked.
Don't worry. Even if it's a false report, it's just a fine.
Sylvan shook his head again.
Then, what do you want to do?
I want to go to Mrs. Hughes's crematorium now to take a look.
Dis picked up his teacup, sipped, and nodded slightly.
You can go, I agree.
Sylvan still stood at the door, not moving. Dis put down the teacup.
Is there something else?
Sylvan licked his lips and said very frankly,
I don't dare go alone.
Ha 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 ha.
Dis suddenly smiled.
When you were little, you were afraid to go to the bathroom at night, and you told me the same thing.
Suddenly, Dis fell silent. A hint of melancholy appeared on his face.
What's wrong, my little Sylvan?
Grandfather, I need to pee. I'm afraid to go to the bathroom alone.
Then can Grandfather wait in the hallway until you're done?
Yes, Grandfather and I go together, okay?
Chapter 42. Another artwork. 2. The taxi drove quite a distance from Mint Street to Mrs. Hughes's crematorium in the suburbs, taking twice as long as when Sylvan took a taxi from Crown Dance Hall home. At the crematorium gate, the taxi driver turned back to look at Dis sitting in the back seat, smiling.
Sir, 45 Lu.
Dis handed over a 50 Lu note. The driver found 5 Lu for change, and Dis accepted it. Then grandfather and grandson got out. Watching the direction the taxi left in, Sylvan silently cursed in his heart.
Damn.
The crematorium gate was firmly closed, with a dilapidated motorcycle parked outside. On the motorcycle seat was a tied-up bundle of blankets. Beside it stood a man and a woman, looking very worried. In the blankets was presumably a corpse brought for cremation, but the crematorium door had a closed sign hanging on it.
Excuse me, are you from the crematorium?
The woman stepped forward to ask. Sylvan shook his head and replied,
No.
Hearing this answer, the man angrily kicked away a stone at his feet, cursing,
We clearly made an appointment yesterday. Why is it closed today? This is completely irresponsible.
If not, let's try somewhere else.
the woman suggested.
It's too late. It's almost dark. If we go to another crematorium now, they'll definitely be closed too.
They're not opening today?
Sylvan asked.
We've been waiting since 1 o'clock until now.
The man said angrily. Sylvan noticed the bundle on their motorcycle, where a corner of the blanket revealed some white hair, presumably an elderly family member who had passed away. Being able to handle funerals at the Inmarai's house actually meant you weren't ordinary people, you were mostly middle class. Even though Aunt Mary scolded Mr. Mosen's children many times, and they skipped most services, they still ended up spending several thousand Lu. Several thousand Lu wasn't a small amount for lower-class families, and welfare list recipients had to be completely alone. Even if their family was too poor to afford funeral costs, as long as they had relatives nearby, they couldn't enjoy welfare benefits like Jeff because they weren't pitiful enough. So when truly lower-class people in Luojia City died, their families would directly take them to the crematorium for cremation. Uncle Mason had said that customers the Inmarai's family considered poor were actually high-quality customers in the crematorium's eyes. At this moment, a red car drove up and stopped at the gate. The door opened. Sylvan was somewhat surprised when the person who got out was Mrs. Hughes. She wore a coffee-colored fur coat and a long blue dress. The still-alive Mrs. Hughes saw Sylvan, and a smile appeared on her face. However, after seeing Dis standing beside Sylvan, she immediately restored her dignified demeanor.
Ah, why is the door closed like this?
Mrs. Hughes stepped forward, puzzled, and took out a spare key from her bag, unlocking it.
Why are you only coming now?
The man couldn't help but step forward to question. Mrs. Hughes glanced at him, then swept her gaze toward the motorcycle, answering,
I don't know either. Today, the appointment list only had 2 orders, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The afternoon must be you. So, I only left one employee to handle the work directly. If the cement factory owner up ahead hadn't driven by and seen you guys waiting at the door and called to notify me, I wouldn't have come. How strange. Is old Darcy absent today?
I don't know what reason your crematorium has, but today, I've been waiting here with my mother for a very long time.
You can go to the government office to complain about me, or simply go to the police station to file a report. I've explained to you, the right to complain is yours, but right now, please keep your distance from me. This is my crematorium. Want to believe I'll throw you into the furnace.
Faced with Mrs. Hughes's sudden forcefulness, the man was scared and dared not complain anymore. A woman running a crematorium alone for so many years must have a strong side. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to manage until now.
By the way, Mr. Dis, why are you here today?
My grandson wanted to visit you.
Dis answered. Mrs. Hughes blinked several times. She wanted to say crude words to tease the handsome Inmarace boy, but couldn't open her mouth. Dis's aura was truly too strong. No wonder Mary always revealed her reverence for her father-in-law during friends' gatherings. After the door was opened, Mrs. Hughes went in. The man also lifted up the bundle of blankets, his wife helping beside him, and the two followed Mrs. Hughes inside.
Want to go in?
Dis asked.
Yes.
Sylvan answered.
If the artistic work isn't Mrs. Hughes, then it's someone else.
Sylvan still believed in his judgment, and the fact that the crematorium door was locked earlier was itself one piece of evidence of the abnormality. Mrs. Hughes walked inside while calling out,
Old Darcy.
The couple carrying the elderly woman's corpse followed behind, followed by Sylvan and Dis. Everyone came together before the glass wall in the burning room. The furnace door was open, with no one inside.
Please cremate my mother first.
The man said,
I have to find my worker.
Mrs. Hughes shouted. She was furious because she had discovered that the furnace was hot, which meant wasted fuel.
Old Darcy, old Darcy.
Sylvan noticed the table in front, more precisely, the urns on top. The last time he came here, the urns and price lists were arranged on display shelves, but now, the urns were stacked like wooden blocks in a neat rectangle. Moreover, these urns were all placed horizontally, with the lids facing toward Sylvan rather than upward. Sylvan stepped forward. His eyes stopped at the position of the outermost left urn at the bottom, reached out, grabbed the urn lid, and opened it.
Ah!
The woman screamed.
Ah!
The bundle in the man's hands also fell, his mother rolling out of the blanket.
Good heavens!
Mrs. Hughes covered her mouth. Dis silently moved a bit closer. In the urn that Sylvan had just opened lay a bloody foot. Moreover, between the toes was stuck a price tag showing 1,500 lu. Sylvan opened another urn above, revealing a knee. Sylvan continued pulling open the top urn lid. Inside was a head, old Darcy's head. And in old Darcy's mouth was clenched a price tag for 10,000 lu. Old Darcy had been dismembered. The parts were put into urns, and then, like stacking bricks, old Darcy's parts were reassembled. At this moment, Sylvan's gaze swept to the desk in front, where there was a phone. He walked to the phone and picked up the receiver, facing the urn table. He discovered his position was exactly in front of where old Darcy had been reassembled. This was the best viewing position. In Sylvan's field of vision, a black figure seemed to appear, arms folded across the chest, appreciating the work just completed. At that moment, the phone beside rang. He frowned slightly, not answering. Soon the phone rang a second time. This time he picked up the receiver.
You're disturbing my artistic creation.
This is the end of today's story. Please like and subscribe to support the channel and follow the next developments. Thank you.